On World News Tonight.
Assassin assassinated. ISIS-K leader behind deadly 2021 suicide bombing at Kabul airport killed by the Taliban. Dare to dream. US President Joe Biden formally launches his campaign for re-election as Trump fires back, blaming Biden for inflation. Rapprochement talks. Russia plays middleman again to solve the conflict and dwindling ties between Ankara and Damascus. And Twinkle tours. Dancers from around the world audition to become Radio City Rockettes.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here's Danidu Witanawasam.
Good evening, you are watching World News, bringing it to you from news across the planet. We begin with updates on the rising tensions in Sudan. The race for foreign and Sudanese nationals, including 16,000 American citizens, to escape Sudan is growing more urgent as a 3-day ceasefire between warring generals is already breaking down.
These images show the destruction along a street in Khartoum as people began venturing out in hopes of finding food or escaping the violence. Gunfire and explosions were heard Tuesday in the Sudanese capital, despite a 72-hour ceasefire brokered by the U.S. and agreed to by the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Meanwhile, nations continued to evacuate foreign nationals from Sudan on Tuesday, including Greece, France, India, and Britain, which launched what it called a large-scale evacuation of its citizens from the country. Millions of Sudanese people have been trapped inside their homes since the fighting began more than a week and a half ago, many without food or electricity. But some have been able to escape the capital, like this woman who fled with her family after their house was hit by a missile.
And the missile didn't go off. It just went through the roof, and we think it's still there in the house. So that became no longer a safe option. We had to move out. I'm in Port Sudan. We got here yesterday afternoon after a nearly 28-hour bus trip. It's a blessing to be here, so we're thankful for that.
The UN says that almost 500 people have been killed and more than 4,000 wounded since the fighting broke out. And with many hospitals closed, the healthcare system in the country is on the verge of collapse.
More news on Sudan as foreign nations race to mount rapid evacuation efforts from the country and violence punctured a fragile US-brokered ceasefire. The World Health Organization warned of a huge biological risk after Sudanese fighters seized the National Public Health Laboratory in capital Khartoum.
A high risk of biological hazard. That was the warning from the World Health Organization on Tuesday after one of Sudan's warring parties seized a laboratory in the capital Khartoum. Dr. Nima Saeed Abid, the WHO's representative in Sudan, said the National Public Health Laboratory houses measles and cholera pathogens as well as other hazardous materials.
So with the electricity shut down and with no technician taking care of all these, the risk of biological hazard is high in Khartoum because of the occupations of the lab by one of the fighting parties. It is not really necessary to say which party.
Fighting between Sudan's army and a paramilitary group has killed hundreds and wounded thousands. Hospitals and other essential services have been paralysed. Many have been left stranded in their homes with dwindling supplies of food and water.
Yesterday we heard more reports of looting of humanitarian supplies and warehouses.
On Tuesday, Jens Lerck, spokesperson for the UN's humanitarian office, said it had been forced to cut back on some of its activities due to intense fighting. Humanitarian operations had been transferred from Khartoum to Port Sudan, he said, adding that they were committed to continue to deliver for the people of Sudan.
One of our headline stories tonight, the Taliban have killed an Islamic State militant who was the mastermind behind a suicide attack at Kabul's international airport in 2021 that killed 13 US troops and scores of civilians during the United States evacuation from the country. US officials said they had determined through intelligence gathering and monitoring of the region that the leader had died, though they did not provide further details on how they had learned that he was responsible for the bombing. The bombing occurred on the 26th of August 2021 as US troops were trying to help Americans and Afghans flee in the aftermath of the Taliban's takeover. The Afghan affiliate of Islamic State, named after an old name of the region, is an enemy of the Taliban. Fighters loyal to the Islamic State first appeared in eastern Afghanistan in 2014 and later made inroads in other areas. Over to the United States, the ingredients for a Trump-Biden rematch are falling into place as President Joe Biden formally announced that he is running for re-election in 2024, asking voters to give him more time to finish the job he began when he was sworn into office and to set aside their concerns about extending the run of America's oldest president for another 4 years.
In his first speech since formally launching his re-election bid, U.S. President Joe Biden was interrupted with chants of 4 more years on Tuesday. Biden told the friendly crowd of union workers there was more to do, but that his economic plan was working, citing headlines from major newspapers.
Wall Street Journal writes, quote, "America is back in the factory business." In a recent column in the New York Times, "Make Manufacture Greater Again" was the title of the article. It goes on to say, President Biden appears to be presiding over the kind of manufacturing serve that Trump had promised.
Earlier on Tuesday, Biden announced his re-election campaign in a video that opens with imagery from the attack on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of Donald Trump, who has falsely claimed there was widespread electoral fraud in 2020 after losing to Biden by 7 million votes. The former president, who Biden might face again in 2024, released a video of his own in response to Biden's candidacy.
You could take the 5 worst presidents in American history and put them together, and they would not have done the damage Joe Biden has done to our nation in just a few short years, not even close.
In his speech at the Washington Hilton on Tuesday, Biden framed his re-election bid as a fight to protect American freedoms.
The threat the MAGA Republicans pose is to take us to a place we've never been.
The 80-year-old president now must overcome Americans' concerns about his age in order to win re-election. William Howell is a professor of American politics at the University of Chicago.
He's going to be 82 when should he be reelected, and if he serves out the entirety of a second term, he'll be closer to 90 than he will be to 80. And this raises lots of concerns, justifiable concerns in my view, about his ability to fulfill all the obligations of the office, concerns about his health, his ability to actually finish out a second term, and what that means for the possibility of a President Harris stepping in. There are lots of concerns that are raised in that space. One more point on this, though, the front runner on the Republican side is no spring chicken either. If it ends up being Trump, he will be 78, which will be, should he win in 2024, that would make him the second oldest person to hold the office.
A poll completed on Monday found that 44% of Democrats say Biden is too old to run, while 35% of Republicans say Trump is too old.
Would you shut up?
The poll showed that a majority of registered voters don't want either candidate to run again, but it still showed Biden with a lead of 43% to 38% over Trump in a potential 2024 rematch.
Now, Donald Trump is facing more legal challenges as E. Jean Carroll's accusation that Donald Trump raped her was not a he said, she said dispute, a lawyer representing the writer told jurors as a civilian trial over the former U.S. president's conduct nearly 3 decades ago got underway.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump is facing a fresh civil trial over alleged sexual misconduct nearly 3 decades ago. A jury was chosen to hear the case in New York on Tuesday. Former Elle magazine advice columnist E. Jean Carroll is suing Trump for allegedly raping her in a Bergdorf Goodman department store dressing room in late 1995 or early 1996, and also for defaming her by denying it happened. Carroll is seeking unspecified damages for pain and suffering, psychological harm, and invasion of privacy. The former president has denied the accusation, calling it a hoax and complete scam in an October 2022 post on his Truth Social platform. Sean Crowley, the lawyer representing Carroll, told jurors on Tuesday the rape allegation against Trump is not a case of he said, she said. In Crowley's opening statement at the trial in a federal court in Manhattan, she said that Trump slammed Miss Carroll against the wall and pressed his lips to hers, an account she says other witnesses were prepared to verify. Among them, 2 friends Carroll confided in after the incident. The lawyer told jurors they would also hear testimony from 2 other women who said Trump sexually assaulted them, which Trump denies. The former president's lawyer, Joe Tacopina, countered in his opening statement that the evidence will show Trump did not assault Carroll. Tacopina also asked jurors in strongly Democratic Manhattan to set aside their feelings for Trump, a Republican and former New Yorker who has stirred up strong opinions from across the political spectrum. Trump did not attend the trial and is not required to in a civil case. According to lawyers from both sides, the former president is unlikely to testify. The trial is expected to resume on Wednesday and last up to 2 weeks.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Now, Russia's defense minister hosted his counterparts from Iran, Syria and Turkey for talks that were part of the Kremlin's efforts to help broker a rapprochement between the Turkish and Syrian governments.
The 2 leaders haven't met in more than a decade. Since President Bashar al-Assad's brutal response to the Syrian uprising in 2011, his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan has labelled him a murderer and called for regime change. Ankara became the main backer of armed opposition in Syria, and the Turkish army has fought to keep Assad's forces out of the northwest province of Idlib, the final rebel stronghold. But there's been recent signs of rapprochement, including a meeting between defense ministers in December. Turkey says it plans to build on those foundations. There are incentives for both sides. In Turkey, there's public hostility towards the roughly 4 million Syrian refugees living there. Many Turkish people support peace talks, believing they would increase the chances of refugees returning home. That's significant for Erdogan, who's seeking re-election in May, but is currently unpopular with voters. For Assad, re-establishing ties with a NATO country could ease his international isolation. He's enjoyed continued support from Russia and is slowly returning to the regional scene. Earlier this month, the president met with Saudi Arabia's top diplomat, spurring talks on a potential return of Damascus to the Arab League. The move sparked protests in Idlib, with opponents still hoping to see the fall of the Syrian dictator.
Now to the latest on the Ukraine crisis. A Russian missile struck a museum there, killing 2 and wounding 10 others. The incident marks yet another attack on civilians.
A Russian missile hit a museum in the Ukrainian city of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region on Tuesday, killing at least 2 people and wounding 10 others. According to Ukraine's State Emergency Service, the 2 killed were women rescue workers retrieved from the rubble of the History Museum. Ukrainian authorities say Russia used its S-300 air defense missiles on the latest attack. The missiles are a type that Ukrainian air defenses are unable to intercept. In response to the deadly attack, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky called Russia a terrorist country that is doing everything to destroy Ukraine and its history, culture, and people. Moscow did not immediately comment on the latest attack, but has previously denied allegations of deliberately targeting civilians. Meanwhile, according to a report in Monday's Washington Post, citing classified U.S. intelligence documents, Ukrainian officials had made plans for mass strikes on Russian cities to mark the first anniversary of the war in February. The country's military intelligence chief had ordered the attack, but was ultimately scrapped after orders from Washington. The details in the report were part of the leaked classified intelligence information that made global headlines in recent weeks. Officials in Kyiv are disputing the Washington Post's article, stressing that the news report was based on unproven information and calling the media outlet sensationalized media.
The Turkish police detained 110 people over alleged militant ties, with a pro-Kurdish lawmaker saying politicians, lawyers and journalists were among those held in raids that he linked to elections on May 14th.
Turkish security sources say that 110 people have been arrested there for alleged ties to Kurdish militants, now less than 3 weeks before its presidential election. The operation was focused on Diyarbakir, the largest city in mainly Kurdish southeast Turkey, and targeted people across 21 provinces accused of links to the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party militant group, also known as the PKK. But a pro-Kurdish lawmaker says top members of his party, journalists, artists and lawyers were among those detained. People's Democratic Party lawmaker Tayyip Temel said on Twitter, quote, "On the eve of the election, out of fear of losing power, they have resorted to detention operations again." The prosecutor's office in Diyarbakir declined to comment. Soaring inflation and public criticism over how the government handled the earthquake that killed at least 48,000 people has left Erdogan and his party facing the toughest electoral challenge since he first rose to power in 2002. One security source said the suspects were accused of providing financing, recruiting and spreading propaganda for the PKK, which is designated as a terrorist group by Turkey and several Western states. Kurds, who have long felt sidelined in Turkish politics, could have a decisive role in May elections. With polls showing support finely balanced between Erdogan's ruling alliance and the opposition, the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, or HDP, is a potential kingmaker. The party faces a potential ban, however, in a constitutional court case in which it is accused of PKK connections that it denies. Its parliamentary candidates are now running under the umbrella of the small Green Left Party. The HDP is not part of the main opposition alliance, but is fiercely opposed to Erdogan. It has faced a crackdown in recent years, with thousands of its members, lawmakers and mayors jailed or stripped of their positions over alleged PKK ties. More than 40,000 people have been killed in the insurgency launched by the PKK in 1984. In recent years, the fighting has shifted from southeast Turkey and is now focused in northern Iraq.
Now, while India is struggling with an overpopulation rate, South Korea worries about a declining rate. South Korea's natural population continues to fall as the country records fresh lows for the number of births for the month of February.
South Korea's birth rate was at its lowest for the month of February since data was first compiled in the early 1980s. According to a report released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday, the number of births tumbled to 19,939, which is a 3.7% decline compared to February last year. Meanwhile, the number of deaths reached some 27,000, a 6.5% decrease on year. This brought the natural change calculated by subtracting the number of deaths from the number of births to a decline of over 7,000. While that's a smaller decline than in January, when the natural population fell by 9,000, South Korea's population has been seeing a natural decline for nearly 4 years in a row. However, things may be looking up with the rising number of marriages following the end of COVID-19 restrictions enabling people to hold a wedding and move in together. There were 17,846 registered marriages in February this year, which is nearly a 17% rise compared to the same month last year. Similarly, the number of divorces also rose on year, albeit showing a smaller rise than the number of marriages. There were 7,228 divorce applications filed in February, a 1.3% rise on year, but a 0.3% decrease on month.
Now, Britain's Prince William has settled a phone hacking claim against Rupert Murdoch's UK newspaper arm for a huge sum after a secret deal was struck with Buckingham Palace. The settlement claims were revealed on Tuesday as a 3-day hearing in London involving William's brother, the Duke of Sussex, and actor Hugh Grant got underway.
Britain's Prince William has been revealed to have settled a phone hacking claim against Rupert Murdoch's British newspaper empire 3 years ago for what was called a very large sum, after a secret deal struck with Buckingham Palace. That's according to lawyers for William's brother Prince Harry in court documents. Harry is suing Murdoch's News Group newspapers, or NGN, at the High Court in London. The case is about multiple unlawful acts allegedly committed on behalf of its tabloids The Sun and now defunct News of the World from the mid-1990s until 2016. The newspaper group has paid out millions of pounds to settle more than 1,000 phone hacking cases. During 3 days of preliminary hearings this week, NGN is seeking to strike out claims by the Prince and the British actor Hugh Grant, arguing they should have taken action sooner. It denies anyone from The Sun was involved in any unlawful activity. NGN's lawyer also denies there was any secret agreement between the publisher and the royal family. In a submission to the court, Harry's legal team said the reason he'd not brought action before was because a deal had been agreed between NGN and Buckingham Palace to hold off any claims until the conclusion of other outstanding phone hacking litigation. They said that Prince William had, quote, settled his claim against NGN behind the scenes in 2020. William's office said it could not comment on ongoing legal proceedings. During a criminal trial brought against News of the World journalists and others in 2014, its former royal editor Clive Goodman said in the mid-2000s he had hacked the voicemails of Harry, William and William's wife Kate.
Welcome back. For more news, let's take you around the world in a minute.
Taiwan's annual Hankoam military drills this year will focus on combating a blockade of the island and preserving the fighting ability of its forces, taking into account China's advances. General Motors lifted its full-year profit and cash flow forecast, citing stronger than expected demand and higher prices, even as pre-tax profits for the first quarter fell. The death toll among followers of Kenyan cult who believed they would go to heaven if they starved themselves has risen to 89, as more shallow graves were revealed amid ongoing exhumations in an 800-acre area of the Shakahola forest, where the self-proclaimed Good News International Church was based. Japanese startup iSpace Incorporated said its attempt to make the first private moon landing had failed after losing contact with its Hakuto R Mission 1 lander, concluding it had most likely crashed on the lunar surface. Microsoft Corp beat Wall Street's estimates for third quarter revenue driven by growth in its cloud computing and office productivity software businesses.
That is all from us here at World News Tonight. Join us again tomorrow as we keep you up to date with the latest from around the world. In case you missed any of the stories tonight, you can watch the whole program on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/AsSasSinated. We end tonight with dancers from 48 states and 32 countries flooding Radio City Music Hall for a chance to become a Radio City Rockette. Thank you for watching. Good night.